Okay, this is the second part of my series on holistic tarot. In this discussion, I'm going to talk about what I call psychic tarot. Now, I want to also say that I just did a quick search on the term holistic tarot, and others are using this term, and probably in a similar fashion. I just want to state that this is not affiliated with any other group. I'm using the word holistic in its general sense. This is not a formal label. Now, I explained first just the primary elements, but there's an element that is probably, for me, one of the biggest boons to doing a read, and that is the psychic aspect. Now, psychic means of the mind. It doesn't always mean supernatural. So what happens is when you're doing a read and you're putting a story together, sometimes information will arise to your mind as you're discussing things with the querent or as the cards come up, because the cards are basically archetypes of the mind. So what happens is they form relationships that are naturally occurring to people's lives. So what can end up happening is synchronicity can be enhanced, and synchronicity, once again, it may or may not be supernatural, but it's definitely a psychic event. And so I utilize this. I open my mind to this as I'm doing a read. And just to give a really good explanation of the type of thing I'm talking about when I say psychic, there was a fire chief once who pulled his men out of a building because he was absolutely certain the building was going to explode. So he got on the radio, he withdrew his people, and sure enough, the building exploded. You would think that this would be a supernatural event, because to me, supernatural is things that we have no explanation for. But it wasn't as supernatural, it was psychic. Now let me explain why it was psychic and not supernatural. There was video of the event, and when they watched the video, they realized that the color of the flames changed slightly. And the explosion was a backdraft explosion. Now what happens in a backdraft explosion, chemistry changes. And not only does the type of fire, the way the fire looks, change slightly, the smell of the fire changes slightly too. So this fire chief subconsciously picked up on those cues. But he was too busy handling the fire and his men and everything to be consciously aware that he knew the building was going to explode. So his subconscious made the connection and got the information to his conscious mind. And when that happened, he had absolute certainty of facts that he could not explain. And so that's how he knew that the building was going to explode. But they had to piece together how he would have known that later. Well, the same thing can happen with a tarot reading. If you open yourself up to the idea that, just know that your subconscious is going to present things to you as you're going through the read, as you're discussing the question with the querent, as you pay attention to things about the querent, you too will get information, and it'll seem like magic. It'll seem like you're reading someone's mind, but really it's just the psychic ability of your subconscious or your unconscious mind, as the term that Carl Jung used, feeding information to your conscious mind. Now, to give you an example of how this had happened to me in a reading once, and just more examples, but the one that I think is most profound was I was reading for a woman, and I really don't like discussing reads, but since, you know, I doubt anyone who views this will know who I'm talking about, and I also just, as a matter of ethics, I rarely discuss reads unless there's a higher reason for it, and I think this counts. She had some problems, and she couldn't afford to have the proper counseling. And it just came to me that she was Catholic. I said, "You're Catholic, aren't you?" And she said, "Yes, I am," which to her must have seemed like I read her mind, or was, when it was a psychic event, it was just not supernatural. At least not in my opinion. But this was important information for me. So I told her, "Listen, I can't help you with your problem. You need professional help in this. You say you can't afford it. But the Catholic, she lived in a large enough city." I said, "There will be a Catholic community, or I forget the exact professional term, but basically a services community. And what you do is you go to these Catholic services community, and I'm not saying you have to go to Mass or get back. I very, very much do not want to try and tell someone how to live their lives. I want to answer their question." And I said, "They should provide you with free counseling. This is something that they do. I used to be a chaplain's assistant, so I know how these things work." So a lot of larger cities do have, these Catholic groups that provide free counseling. And I don't just mean with a minister or a priest. I mean professional, psychological or medical or whatever. They will help you get that. So this idea that I knew she was Catholic, and it was important to answering her question and getting help for this person. How did I know that? Well, I will very much submit to you that, yeah, it could have been a supernatural event. I could have contacted the higher mind somehow, and it imposed that information to me. But I think it's more than likely that she used a phrase that Catholics might use more often than other people. There might have been something, and by the way, she was not sitting in front of me. I was on video. She was typing, so all I got from her were her words typed across a chat mode. But she could see and hear me. But I still would submit to you that the most likely explanation of me realizing and knowing that she was Catholic was she probably used a phrase that Catholic people, because they have a certain culture, might use more often. My subconscious probably recognized that. A bell went off because it was important, because that religion does provide services. I mean professional services, not religious services. I'm not talking about a Mass. I'm talking about, you can go to these groups, and if you are Catholic and you need help, they will help you get it. So for me, this is a psychic event, but not a supernatural one. I can't prove, it's not like I went back through the dialogue and looked for something that might have tipped me off, but I'm sure that if, someday there'll be a computer algorithm that can figure these things out. Our brains are basically a neural net that can figure this information out, but we're not always aware of it. So for me, this is the psychic element of tarot. You want to remain open to the fact that you will not be consciously aware of everything that's happening in the read, but you want to be open to information coming to you about the read, about the querent, and not have to necessarily be pinned down to how you know it. So that's just an aspect that I wanted to bring up and discuss. There's probably more and better examples of it. But beyond just reading the cards and interpreting what they say, opening yourself up to that level of information, particularly since these things are based in archetypes of the mind, it's a perfect doorway to allow for that. So by all means, I'm not saying that this is a higher level of reading or anything like that. It's just different. And I think it's because I've had so much experience in other forms of mysticism that this is something that I kind of picked up on as I was learning tarot. So I wanted to make that point and express that, and hopefully it'll inspire discussion, or maybe someone out there will add that to how they read if they're not presently, because it is a very, very good tool.
Okay, well, I just wanted to bring that up. We got 2 more videos to go. I believe I said intuition and supernatural, and we'll get to those next. Peace.